financial advisor walk into a bar.
Oh, and then what happens, Dave?
Well, the question turns around and says, well, what do I do if my customer can't pay? It's a really big invoice.
Can't pay. So this is different to doesn't want to pay, because that's a common one, and sometimes you don't know the difference. You know, are they saying they can't pay, but maybe they can, they just don't want to.
Yep.
But if they can't pay, what do you do? So I think that's you rewind and you go, oh, I shouldn't have done business with them in the first place. That's what you do. So can you go back in time? Is that an option?
Well, perhaps.
So
a hard one. Like, that's a real challenge, isn't it? I mean, because you go, but they've been a really good customer for a long time, or you know, they've given me all the right signs. They've been consistently paying in the past. And we've been building and relying upon them, and you know, and then all of a sudden they say, "Look, I'm sorry, we're just not in a position. We just can't pay you."
So one of the big issues, I suppose, is your relationship with them. Is it something that you want to work with them and have a positive relationship on an ongoing basis? And maybe you can do another deal with them where you make the money up. But often that's fraught with danger, because you go, okay, well, I'll do that, and then they don't pay you on that deal too. So
it also depends if it's a product or a service.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and maybe you've paid your suppliers to provide for them, so you might have debts that now you can't pay, which then leads you on to insolvency, which is a whole other topic. But the first thing I think you got to do is look at the relationship, and then look at, well, what is your actual, I know obviously the lawyer's going to say, look at your contract. Who's your contract with? Sometimes you think, oh yeah, it's with this entity, but it's actually with that one in the group.
Well, that's if you have a contract.
Well, right, yeah. So often there's a credit application or terms and conditions or something. If it's verbal, if it's verbal, and sometimes it is. And I know we've dealt with some very big, like, listed clients, so listed on the stock exchange, but they've gone, oh yeah, we just ordered that, and maybe we did a purchase order number, but that was it, you know, and our terms and conditions weren't included. Their terms and conditions was all, so often it's poorly documented. But
because what is it? There's like the register where you're
the PPSA,
yes,
Personal Property Security Register, or Personal Property Security Act. Yes, so you can actually register interest in property in the same way. We're all used to registering interest in land, like your title search. You can register interest in companies and in property, like a trailer full of nuts. You can register. So there's one aspect to all of that. But I think you've got to look at your contract and go, well, who am I contracting with? Because that's the person who owes me the money. And do they have any money? You know, that actual entity. And is there a personal guarantee associated or some other security? You know, maybe there's a security in land. Sometimes you can put a caveat on a property. Sometimes the individual might be responsible. There's a personal guarantee as well as the company. Sometimes multiple companies might be responsible. So, you know, there's ways of pursuing debts where the company can't pay, and maybe the company can't pay, but someone else can.
But is there a threshold in some of those? Like, I mean, at a point, do you say, well, it goes back to, irrespective of the dollar value of your engagement, you probably need some terms and conditions that give you the capacity to be able to claw back or to deal with something. Or is there a threshold where you say, look, you know, if the product's under, 100,000, it's not worth worrying about because, you know what, you just sort of deal with it. So is that a real balance for some businesses too?
It is. I mean, you obviously, lawyers would like everyone to sign a 1,000-page contract every time they even turn around, right? So that's the starting point. But I think if it's difficult for your business to get people signing off, or there's, you can have an overarching contract that relates to all of the services or a whole bunch of individual supplies, or you can have levels of contracts. So you can say, we just send you our one-pager purchase order for anything under 50 grand or whatever it is. And beyond that, it's got to be a longer document, or it's got to be, the sales manager needs to approve it, not just the salesperson or whatever it is. Certainly you should internally have some sort of systems and control.
Well, that goes into your internal sort of systems and processes.
Yeah, and even more upfront. I mean, and it's easy to go back in time, I was saying before, but it's not easy to go back in time, but that you need, to some level of credit assessment. So you shouldn't, as a business, no business should just be dealing with anyone who walks in the door. You should be making some assessment. Now, it might be just you use your spidey senses, or it might be that you get your sales manager to assess, or it might be that there's a formal credit assessment. It might be that, if you're supplying over 100,000, that you need the company to sign terms and conditions, plus you need a personal guarantee. If it's over 300,000, you need property security, or you need a deposit of 50% for over, whatever it is.
Well, especially if it's a particular product that you are selling to a customer that is bespoke for them. that you've then had to purchase materials to do that delivery. So you can turn around and go, right, I'm going to sell this item to Alex for $100,000, but I need to buy $30,000 worth of materials.
Yep. So maybe I want the 30 grand up front.
Yeah, this is where people sometimes forget. They're like, but if my customer can't pay, is the topic for today.
Yeah.
So this is where it is. It's like, yes, but for me to produce that, because you're a specialist, manufacturer or something, I think a little bit different for some of the services industries. But again, it comes back to, there can be that pre-work before you do the delivery of your service. Therefore, it's like, well, I really need you to pay me 20 or 30% of the total cost, because we've got a month of pre-work before we can actually deliver the service.
And I think if you explain that to customers, they sort of understand. I know we have that issue with some of our filing fees and conveyancing. So we do conveyancing, so, people's houses. But, we, in order to prepare the contract, you need to do a search with the local council and the water authority, all that. You need to pay for that. You need to pay for that at the time, not later. So we pay for it, and then we collect it off the client at the settlement. But what happens if there is no settlement, that the client decides not to pay, not to sell the house or whatever, or it all falls over? Then we've lent money effectively to the client. And so on one level, even if it settles, we're still lending money. And should we be doing that? Maybe the client should be paying up front. And then on another level, if it falls over and the client says, well, I don't want to pay you, and you say, but we paid the service provider for this search that you needed, and they say, well, but I didn't get the value because I didn't actually sell my house. So so you get into this difficult, position, and where the difficulty we have is that you're not sure how much the searches are going to cost exactly. We know generally, but the council in Boroondara might charge X, and the council in Sunshine might charge Y. We don't know. So, but that's a good example of kind of, we've got to put our hand in our pocket and pay some money. And if you're doing lots of conveyancing, that might be a lot of money at any one time that you've got kind of hanging out in the air, hoping that these things all settle and that you collect it again. And certainly we don't charge the clients interest or anything for that. We don't charge them anything at all. We just charge what it costs us. But really, we're effectively lending money to our clients over that period and then collecting later. So it's just something to factor in, and I think everyone should be doing some kind of assessment on which clients they, when you provide a product or a service and to be paid later, you're offering credit. It's credit, but it is credit, and so you should have a credit assessment. And I'm not saying you need to run everyone through like a bank could assess you, but you've got to have some process to who you're dealing with.
But also it shows a commitment from a customer or client. If there's an element where, but that's okay. Like, you've asked me to do this. I know it's a big job. It's over a 6 or 12 month period. I can't fund it all the way through, and I don't want to fund, that particular transaction. Therefore, I'm going to request a 30% up front. Now, if the customer says to you, I don't want to do that, well, I mean, that to me is an element of a warning sign.
It is. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we have, personal guarantees are a good example. Sometimes we require clients to give personal guarantees, particularly if you're dealing with a client who's like, they might be a very small, it might be a guy with a van, right? And if you're dealing with a guy with a van, his company or her company, not worth very much. So a personal guarantee in that context might make sense. Whereas we've got a client they've been operating for 125 years. They've got a whole bunch of shareholders, a whole bunch of board of directors, all that. The individual that you're dealing with, which might be the sales manager or something, they're not going to sign a personal guarantee, right? Because it's not their deal. So there's an appropriateness to a personal guarantee that's different in different circumstances. So I guess all I'm saying is you've got to turn your mind to those kind of things when you're signing clients up or when you're signing customers up.
But there's also that issue that a lot of people forget. If your particular customer or client normally pays, 7 days, 21 days, 14 days, 30 days, whatever it is, if all of a sudden it's like, so you were a 7 day, you're now at 30 days, and now you're at 60 days, but you keep asking me to deliver stuff to you. There's a point where you go, you know what, you've got to have those hard conversations with a customer sometimes, because you're, again, as you say, lending them money as such, because you're delivering more product, which is increasing your exposure. There's a point where some people, you just got to ring them and go, you need to settle last month's account.
Yeah, well, I'm walk off the job.
We're just not in a position to keep supplying you with materials. We know you're selling them because it might be a component that goes into their production process. Or they're on selling that, whatever it might be, to someone else. So it's like, so you've collected out of that. Like it just cascades its way through. So again, I think there are some early warning signs. Sometimes if you've had a good relationship with a particular customer and their debtor days extend.
Yes, that's a red
be on top of that sort of stuff.
And
because it does slip very quickly and very easily.
Yeah, and sometimes you're almost getting to a position where you're getting blackmailed by your customer.
Yeah.
Because I know we see this a lot. Clients say, I've got to keep working because if I don't finish the job, they'll never pay me. And if I stop halfway through, and you go, well, look, there might be some logic to that. I'm not saying that's wrong, but you really got to turn your mind to that pretty carefully, because every day you work for them when they've already sent you a big red flag, which is not paying you according to the way they normally do or the way you require or whatever. And then they often go quiet. They don't answer the phone and all that. We see that all the time. If you communicate, almost always there'll be a deal to be done. But if you stop communicating, then it's when people ring up us and start suing everybody, because
look at a lot of those commercial builders that just Porter Davis, subbies would have been doing work on those, and some of the bigger builders that have unfortunately gone into liquidation. I just think it's sometimes it's a really unfortunate, but it can be some of those big jobs where there's multiple subcontractors who may be a small guy themselves, and they've been providing materials and doing this and waiting for the next progress payment. They can be out of pocket 60, 80, 100 grand.
Absolutely.
For a big business, it's like, what's the matter? It's like, no, but for a business that might turns over $1 million, 100 grand is a lot of dough. They just don't have that sort of cash flow to sustain that or to allow that to continue. And this is where it's a real challenge, I think, sometimes for people when the customer can't pay.
So if we go back to the topic, which is what do I do when my customer can't pay me? And we've said, well, you've got to look at the relationship. You've got to look at whether you want it to continue or not. You've got to look at the your credit assessment process and about who your contract's actually with, because sometimes it can surprise you. And there's actually some legal options. You can obviously sue. Everyone knows about that. You go and sue in debt recovery. And you sue in the magistrates court for anything under 100 grand, and in the superior courts for above that. But you can also do what they call a statutory demand, which is not well understood. And that's a company thing. So the debtor has to be a company. If the debtor's an individual, good, but most debtors are companies. So if the debtor's a company, you can serve a special demand on them, has to be supported by an affidavit. And if the debtor's a company and the debt's not disputed, so they don't say, no, you didn't do the work properly. They say, I know I owe you, but I can't pay you, which is often they do. Then they've got 21 days to respond to that. And if they don't either pay the debt or sort it out with you in that 21 days, then you can apply to the court to wind them up, and then appoint a liquidator and sell their assets and so on. So it's a sort of an express way of recovering debts and of potentially, of liquidating companies that are insolvent. And so it's, I think, quite a powerful tool that people often don't understand, don't know about. I think they've got to sue everyone, and sometimes you do. If the debt's disputed, you need to sue.
But sometimes the threat of that can push people into a form of, I don't want to go through that. I don't need to be
pay that guy. And there's probably a whole bunch of debts, right? They owe a whole bunch of people, and so you want to go to the top of the pile, right, and get paid. So that's quite a powerful and relatively inexpensive. It's a lot cheaper than going to court and suing. So it's something you should be aware of. And then in certain industries, there's other mechanisms, like in the building industry, there's the Building and Construction Security for Payments Act. So if you make a claim under that act, again, there's a process. You've got 10 days to respond. If they don't respond, it becomes a debt. They're not perfect processes by any means, but they're certainly processes that are kind of easy and cheap to use. And that should be one of the tools in your toolkit to try and get paid. Every claim you send out as a builder should be a claim under that act, which you only need a little disclaimer on your documents to do that. So it's pretty easy. And then it truncates. It makes the time frame shorter to deal with things, and then you can get the claim assessed and hopefully paid much quicker. So
because if you let it drag on, all of a sudden they've been paying out everyone else that's gone through that process.
Yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you've got an agreement with someone, that entity, and that entity has no money, absolutely no money, or cannot pay you, then, the best lawyer in the world isn't going to be able to magic money into your account, right?
Why not?
There's nothing good like being
I thought you blokes get to perform miracles.
You just make them. All you need to do is make them pay. And there's various tools I can use, and I'm very clever and 5 steps ahead of most people. But even so, if
violence is not one of them.
Well, that's right. You better maybe hire a gangster. They'll probably be cheaper and be a lot more effective than me. Although then, what happens if they ask you to pay them? You can do that. So there is, if they've got no money and you're sure that's the entity, you don't have any security, you've got no other person to seek the money from, and that entity you sure has no money, then your chances of getting are very low. So maybe you just write it off, and then maybe learn the lesson for next time in making sure that you don't do take that same risk again. So get better security or improve your processes.
And that's business sometimes.
That's right. Yeah. Sometimes you've got to go, well, that one didn't go well. Why didn't it go well? What have I learned from it? How do I, you can get a debtor's insurance. So it is possible to insure against this risk. It can be quite expensive and it's sort of industry specific, but we've certainly got plenty of clients who have debtor's insurance. And sometimes it's a requirement that you sue and get a judgment. But then once you've got a judgment, you can claim and get all your money, including some amount for legal costs back. Yep. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of things you can do. If your customer absolutely has no money and they're the only person you can go against, then you're in trouble. Yep. But there's ways of having a crack at them. There's other potential targets, other people you can collect money from. Maybe the director has some money. Maybe you have a implied agreement with them. There's lots of things to do. But really at the front end is where you get all the value by having a good credit assessment process, making sure you've got good terms and conditions, making sure your terms and conditions claim for legal costs, which means if you do sue, you can get that back, making sure they claim interest and other stuff, default provisions. One of the problems we see a lot is clients go, I invoice, I don't know, $1,000 a month. And then when they haven't paid the first 1,000, and you go, well, that's the only 1,000 that's due. You should have a default term to say once it's overdue, the whole amount becomes due, so you can collect the 50,000 or whatever it is. So there's various ways you can sort of improve your chances. There's no magic bullet, but there's a lot of things you can do to make sure that you're in a stronger position if the debtor can't pay.
Yeah, which again, I think the point comes back in a lot of circumstances that we talk about is seek advice, like talk to people, and as part of your setup process, and you may become more sophisticated as it gets bigger and better. But I do think it is one of those things. I mean, sometimes it just happens, and you can.
It is
you can have these relationships with people, and for whatever reason, again, I don't think. My personal view, people don't go into business to rip people off.
Yep.
But majority of the population are there to kind of enjoy life and, they run good businesses and they want to support other businesses.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just, you're just unlucky.
Yep.
And circumstances have just come against you. But I do think if you're looking at it, when you talk about what if my customer can't pay, being aware of the percentage of a customer of your total revenue.
Yes, that's a good
which
point.
Is a risk management strategy that says, this is my largest or single customer.
Yeah.
What's my what if strategy and what's my what if scenarios if something was to occur? And just be aware of how you may be able to do that. Now, you may be in an industry where they are the only customer.
Yep.
You did deliver a particular product and that's it. Like that, okay. That is the case. But if that's the case, you may also be the only supplier.
Yep. Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So sometimes it can work to your advantage. But if there are multiple players and you have a very high concentration on a single customer, I think part of your overall risk management strategy should be to seek other customers.
Yeah. That's right. In fact, then your concentration risk or whatever they call it is lower. And I think a lot of small businesses, they might not have one customer, but they might have 5 that are 80% of their revenue or whatever. And if one of them fell over, could you deal with 20% less revenue, in one go, whatever it is?
Yeah.
And part of your risk management is saying, well, I think we need to diversify, or we need to, it might even be we need to just get 10% or half or whatever up front from some of those customers or whatever, so that it just lowers our overall risk. Again, no magic bullet, but there's just a few things you can do, and maybe they'll agree to that, or maybe you'll say, okay, well, you can pay a bit later, but you've got to pay some up front or whatever.
Yes.
You might do a deal with them so that you can just
know your numbers, like know that you've got that exposure.
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, you can't get blood from a stone if people don't have the money.
Yeah.
They don't. But you need to have a risk assessment up front, and then obviously to have a collection strategy. And you're quite right. You look at your whole overall book of debts and go, okay, these ones are okay, but these ones are at risk. Maybe the small ones we write off, learn the lesson. Maybe the bigger ones we chase. Maybe it's worth spending money chasing them. Maybe it's not. Maybe we can spend money because we've got good terms and conditions where we can recover our legal costs. Maybe we can't. I know I see a lot of people who either they don't have terms and conditions, or they do but they haven't sent them. But you got to send them.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, you got to send them with the contract. If you send the contract and then say, by the way, our terms and conditions, they're on our website or whatever, no good. You got to send them with the contract so they. And then if they're accepted, then it puts you in a better position. Again, no bullet, but you're in a better position than you would have otherwise. But it is part of doing business. The reality is sometimes people won't pay you. And as you're saying, going back to the point about whether they're nice people or not, I think often they're nice people, but then they've not been paid and they go, well, because I haven't been paid, I'm not going to pay you. It's not my fault. I'm still a nice person, but I've been screwed, so therefore I'm going to screw you, which I think is really dodgy logic, but people do.
That is the logic that people
follow. Yeah, that's right. And, especially in the building industry, it's very common to not be paid and therefore not pay on. And it's not good enough. I think everyone should expect to be paid, promptly by their customers. And
especially if you've delivered the product or service to someone who's done it in good faith.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the sad truth, I suppose, is the reality is some portion of your customers aren't going to pay, and you've got to kind of have a plan around that. What do you do about it? And just be sensible on it.
Yep. All right. Well, anything else you wanted to sort of throw in there for the mix for today before we close out?
No, only really that managing your cash flow, the lifeblood of business. I'm not the first person to say that, and that managing your debtors is part of that, and the risk profile of your debtors. Because if you 10% of your debtors don't pay you, then you've just given a 10% discount across your whole book, and that's that's all money that had just been in your pocket. So collecting your debts sort of promptly and efficiently and taking as little risk as possible is a real key, should be a key focus for any business owner.
Yeah, and especially if that debt that you're trying to collect you've purchased materials with debt, it means your own debt levels that you're paying interest on. You're copying a delay in the payment, plus you're copying the interest expense on the other side. So, definitely. Keep on top of your debtors. All right. Well, thank you, Alex. So as we close out our conversation today, I would like to thank Alex from Taurus Legal Management. He can be contacted via LinkedIn at Alex Martin or via the website tauruslawyers.com.au.
Thanks, Dave. And I'd like to thank David Murdoch, the wealth activist from Paxton Bridge. He can be contacted at David Murdoch at LinkedIn or at the website paxtonbridge.com.
Cheers. Thank you, Alex, and look forward to chatting next time.
Thanks. See you next time.